This podcast is brought to you by Bagot Centra, the Square Clara, for all your grocery needs. And why not try our delicious food made fresh every day from our deli? Bagot Centra Clara. Live every day.
Broadcasting live from the little town of Clara, County Offaly, it's What's the Story with Lloyd Bracken. Get in touch today through all our social channels and have your say. Oh, and thanks for listening. Now it's over to you, Lloyd. What's the story?
Hi everyone, welcome back to What's the Story? This is episode 14. Yes, 14. Hard to believe the weeks are absolutely whizzing by. Thanks to Vincent Devine in last week's podcast. Very entertaining, and what a great success story indeed for Vincent, and I wish him continued success in the future. Also thanks to Danny Price for joining me on the first What's the Story 10-minute catch-up. We'll have more of them catch-ups on the podcast coming soon. Also, please tell your friends about the podcast. Not everyone is on social media, so I'd be happy to make a CD for anyone that needs them. My next guest, or guests should I say, are doing tremendous work here in Clara Town, whether it's highlighting the past, showcasing our town, telling stories of long ago, and also cleaning up some very important areas of the town. It's great to welcome the Clara Heritage Committee to the podcast. My first guest is Bernie Henry, one of the founding members of the Heritage Committee. Bernie, thanks very much for joining me.
Thank you very much, Lloyd, for having us. It's a pleasure for us to be here.
You're very welcome. Bernie, tell me first, when and why did the Clara Heritage Committee start?
Well, that's a very good question. The notion of the Clara Heritage Committee was first muted to me at a party for Nan Kelly up there in Erie, Kathy and Pa's house. And I suppose the only advice I have for you, if you go to a party, stay away from Mary Delaney.
You get a job.
Because instead of getting a bottle of whiskey, I got a job. And don't go to a party if you can't stomach the aftermath, which is work for the next 5 years.
Right. But you're enjoying this work though.
I loved it actually. Mary, Brian and Tim McMahon, they're all part of the community council and they're very active and they provide the infrastructure, which is fantastic. And I suppose Mary persuaded me that I would like to work on a subcommittee called the Heritage Committee. And it was only afterwards I realised that there was no subcommittee. What Mary really meant was that she'd like to get a subcommittee called the Heritage Committee. And it began, I suppose, quickly with Ray, Brian, Mary. Your sister Sandra was very proactive in the beginning. Ger Bracken, Gloria Telford, Patricia O'Mara and Michelle Coyne. They all got together and they helped and got the first few events going and I suppose gained the momentum. And then Andrew and Jenny McGlynn, Andrew would be grandnephew of the McGlyns that were here in the square and he lived down here for a while but then moved back to Wicklow. And then we found the real treasures, the younger people that were joining with us, which was absolutely fantastic because we're nearly all in the, I won't say, not all in the older category, you know, now Michelle and Sandra would probably shoot me if I said that, wouldn't she? But a lot of us would have an older profile. Yeah. And so it was really good to get some young people on board. And what astonished us was the level of knowledge and interest.
Okay, so you have a good mixture there now.
We have a great mixture. We have a cross-section of the community from every perspective, you know, men, women, young, old. And I'm always fascinated with the amount of interest that people in Clara have in heritage.
So why is our town heritage so important?
Well, that's a good question, you know. It's one thing to say that a town has loads of heritage, but it's a different thing to get a town recognised and acknowledged as a heritage town. And to do that, you have to have the infrastructure. And I suppose that's what the committee is there for. Clara is an absolutely amazing town. Everywhere you look, there's heritage. Starting with the architecture itself. I mean, there's fabulous architecture in Clara. You've got the heritage sites. You've got the beautiful natural beauty. The river. I mean, where would you get a river like it? The engineering works along the river. The old graveyards. That would be very, very useful for Tourism Ireland for launching into the new genealogy study. You know, maybe they'll set up a little genealogy centre here in Clara.
Okay, so what's the ultimate goal then?
The ultimate goal, I suppose, is to help preserve and promote the heritage of Clara and have it acknowledged and recognised as a heritage town. And in doing that, ensure that any new development will enhance rather than destroy our heritage. Now, that goes right across from our social heritage to folklore, even the simplest of things. Like we all know how wonderfully Clara does funerals. And that's one worry of mine with COVID, that when all that's over, because I was a recipient of the outpouring of grief that Clara does in the most magnificent way, and coming from Dublin, I wasn't conscious of how wonderful that was for people. I'd hate to see those traditions in Clara disappear. So that would all be encompassed into the Heritage Committee. And we don't have to do anything in terms of creating it because it's already there.
So you think there's a human aspect as well as the architecture?
Oh, absolutely. The stories, the music, the sport, and It's not like this is the first time somebody has been looking to preserve the heritage of Clara. We're trying to encompass it, and we're trying to provide an infrastructure for, I suppose, the county council to help us build, because our experience of the council has been that they've been very, very good and very supportive, and Waterways Ireland, the wetlands, Park and Wildlife's, everybody from the council, the heritage officer, John Connolly, I'm not even going to name names, because if I start naming names, Basil, the whole lot of them, but they have to have a community infrastructure, particularly now with community development funding coming through these streams. So in many ways, the community council has helped us to start that kind of thing and make sure that we have the infrastructure there. So when funding comes on, and when something like, why does Burr get beautiful street furniture and Clara doesn't? Because they're acknowledged as a heritage town.
Abbey Leaks is another example of that.
Yeah. And if you go through Clara, the facade of the town, it's like as if you might have been in the 18th century. It's beautiful. And we want that acknowledged and recognised. And then the industrial history. I mean, that's a whole other podcast altogether. I couldn't even begin with that.
There's a big social aspect to the committee as well. You do a lot of walks and tours.
We do a lot of walks, we do a lot of tours. I have to say the best support we've got altogether is from the community. That wasn't expected in the enthusiastic way that it's been given. It's been fantastic. Lots of people have been up helping every weekend, every Monday night, helping with the graveyards, clearing up. People are coming on the walks, and then they're giving ideas. And you could say the Heritage Committee, we hope to be able to expand it into a larger group, so that not just the committee are involved, so that the whole town, anybody who wants to be involved is involved in some way.
You had a recent walk up to last Sunday, I believe.
The walks were officially to end the Thursday before that, but then our Hawkeye over there, Clara, she notices everything, and she was able to tell us that Sunday was National Walking Day. Now, wouldn't it be a sin to overlook that?
You managed to get the attention of a great Anne-Marie Kelly as well on Midlands 103. She's been out and about with the Heritage Group recently.
She has. She's been out, and seemingly she's going to stay coming out and about us, and that is fantastic. So thank you very much, Anne-Marie.
It's great media coverage.
Great media coverage, but it's a great town. It's a fantastic town. It's got so much. And Lloyd, when people come to visit me, they're always telling me how fantastic this town is, how beautiful it is to walk through, the fantastic stone walls we have, the magnificent river. If anybody goes down, they come back and say, like, why is that hidden? Why is everything in this town let go as if it didn't matter? It's the most magnificent town you could get in Ireland.
Yeah, it's nice the way the Heritage Group are now showcasing the town, which is brilliant.
Our first project was to raise awareness. And the first project we did was a video of the river. And we put that up on YouTube. It's called Clara's Hidden Gem. That was the first project we did. And that was to raise awareness, not just in the town, but in officialdom as well, to show, look, there is this magnificent river. There is this magnificent town.
Would you like to see a tourism centre in Clara or a museum, some piece like that?
Well, funny you should ask that now, because one of the things we were only saying a couple of weeks ago was that we are perfectly located for a smaller kind of epic museum with all the graveyards around us, with the train coming into our doorstep. Where else would you get a train right into the town?
It's a great service, yeah.
The motorways, you could walk from the train to the motorway. I mean, it's just fantastic. Yeah, I think we are perfectly located for this new genealogy push that Tourism Ireland are doing for the post-COVID tourist industry. I think we could tap into that.
So Bernie, if there's anyone listening, how do they get involved with the Clara Heritage Committee?
They contact Facebook if they like, or email any of us.
Okay, so it's that simple.
It's a simple. Well, you see, the town doesn't belong to anybody, and the heritage doesn't belong to a committee.
I believe you have members working at the graveyard this evening, do we?
We do. They're all up there. As you know, we got out of it. We said, we have to go down to Lloyd. Sorry, we can't work tonight.
Well, you can head back up there now if you want.
Thank you, Lloyd.
Take me through your ultimate dream or the ultimate goal, a long-term plan of the Clara Heritage Committee.
Well, long-term plan, I suppose, heritage is not all just about going back. Heritage is going back to see where you can go forward. I suppose there's an old Japanese saying, the further back you look, the further forward you can see. So that's what we're hoping to do. And you may not realise this, but there was a time when, a couple of years ago, UCD Architectural School decided to do an architectural study of a random town that they felt would be suitable for heritage. And guess which town they picked upon? With nobody knowing about it, it was purely by coincidence that we found this out a couple of years later, and they had all the maps and lots of stuff done out. And one of the things that came to their attention was that Clara is perfectly suited as a bicycle hub for a bicycle way, because you know the way of the Green Way in Streamstown and the Blue Way going across Rahan. Well, if you came across the bog and met them, you'd have this train station right into the middle, so somebody could come down with their bike from Dublin and cycle home any way they wanted to go. And then you've got Liz Church out there with the Pilgrim Way to Clonmacnoise. So we're actually perfectly situated in the centre of the country as a bicycle hub.
Right, there is so much untapped potential in Clara.
So much.
It's unbelievable, but hopefully with the Heritage Committee, we'll tap into some of that.
Hopefully more people will become involved, and it's great to see young people involved.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and there are a lot of young people very interested, which is great. And the schools, and I suppose everybody.
Bernie, thanks very much for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you, and thanks again for having us, Lloyd.
You're very welcome. Thank you. My next guest joining me is another very prominent member of the Clara Heritage Committee, Tara Mcgrath. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, Lloyd. Thanks for having me here.
You're very welcome. Tara, how did you become involved with the Clara Heritage Committee?
A bit like Bernie as well, Mary Delaney is a very persuasive woman. She had known me from other committees that I'd been working on, and that I had a kind of an interest in heritage and history in general. So she had asked me to join the committee, and so I was co-opted onto it a couple of years ago. So yeah,
it's great to see I suppose younger people, no offence to the other members of the group, getting involved in the committees, because we had Barry Flynn on a few weeks ago and he was appealing to younger people to try it for a week, even a week or two. Would you?
Yeah, I think it's important because, I suppose a younger generation bring a different dynamic to the group. We have the likes of Brian and Tommy who have the history, and they're great for the hard graft when it comes to cleaning the cemeteries and that. But I suppose the younger generation like myself can do the research and the social media side of things and trying to promote it in a different way. And it's important to keep that continuity, I think, as well in the town, that we're bringing it to another generation, that this history and the folklore and the heritage is not lost with the older generation, that we're bringing it right through to a new generation.
Do you find the social media now isn't it a must?
Absolutely. Now we're kind of taking baby steps with it. We just have the Facebook page and it's working well for us. We're in the process of trying to get a web page up and running as well. But yeah, it reaches a lot of people. I was looking at our member list there before I came out, and we have, the usual, the Irish and the English followers, but it goes as far as Canada, Australia, even the Middle East, that we have a few members over there. As I said, Australia, Singapore, I think as well, Germany, the Netherlands. So it's a useful tool, and people can dip into it whenever, they have a few minutes and see what we've put up. And it's a way of connecting with family and friends abroad. Well, and
it's very fresh as well. Just keep it updated every day.
Yeah, I try to keep an eye on, say, the various heritage sites and on, say, Twitter and Instagram and that. And as Bernie mentioned National Walking Day. We had determined we were going to be finished last week, and then we realised, oh no, we've another day to go, so we couldn't overlook it. So we had a nice turnout on Sunday, and the weather was good.
There is many different aspects in Clara of heritage. Was that something that drew you? I know you're interested in history, but did you see the bigger picture with Clara?
Yeah, and again, echoing what Bernie has mentioned, there's a huge amount of potential in Clara. When you look back to what Goodbody's had here 100 years ago or that, and the people that were employed here, those families have now left. I was looking over the census and some of the names that run it that aren't in Clara anymore. And what I'd love to do is to reach out to those descendants and say, look, your parents or grandparents or whatever the case may be lived here. This is the house, this is the factory, and actually bring them back to Clara. Like Bernie said, we need the infrastructure to bring them back to. We need some kind of museum, some kind of heritage site that we can show them, what the workings of the factory was, what they produced, and actually have something to come back to. So, that's kind of where I'd like to see the group develop, is kind of that genealogy side. And that in turn will pay dividends to the town. You'll have more visitors coming, be it out to the bog or down to the interpretive centre, and then just having the throughput through the town in terms of visitors. There is so much potential there. It's just a chance of tapping into it and getting the support from people around the town.
Would you get many requests for people to trace back their heritage?
We've got a few, and when I suppose work was started doing on the graveyards and that, people knew there was families that were buried there, but they just didn't know where they were. So one of the projects we're actually looking at the minute is using the information that Brother Raphael Keenan and others had done before us, but trying to actually plot where those graves are, document them. There's loads of online resources where you can actually put photographs of old headstones so people can actually see them remotely. But even just in the graveyard, to actually have a map of the graveyard and where they are, so people who call to the graveyard know where they can locate the family headstones if they've, generations past.
Okay.
So there's a load of work that could be done. And I suppose just again to add to the amenities in the town in terms of the knowledge that's there.
So if somebody wanted to trace their long lost aunt or uncle.
Yeah.
So can they come to the Heritage Committee and find out more information?
Well, we've got a couple of requests, and usually what I would say, like, there's a lot of information for everybody online that they can look at themselves, and it's free. A lot of people tend to be pushed towards these paid subscriptions, but it's not actually necessary. But I would say to anybody, the first port of call is talk to your friends and family. Try and plot out who the grandparents and great-grandparents are. And, if they hit a brick wall, they can certainly come to us and we'll give them a steer. There's a great website called irishgenealogy.ie. It's very, very user-friendly. It's run by the Department of Arts, Heritage and Culture. And you can just put in your details and it will give you birth certs, death certs, marriage certs right up to the 1860s. The census in the National Archives is, again, a free resource that people can use. So, there's a lot of information there. What I tend to do is I've subscribed to some of the newspapers online. It's a paid subscription, so it gives you kind of a different element to it. You might get newspaper reports, court reports sometimes, marriage notices and death notices, which adds a different dynamic that you wouldn't normally get. So yeah, there is loads of information there, and we're more than happy to help anybody, give them a steer as to how they can do it themselves. Sometimes the joy is doing it themselves, but if they hit a brick wall, we can certainly try and help
That's
them.
fantastic. Good service, yeah. And some of the sites we talked about, the train station, I know you had some brilliant pictures up there, and a couple of months ago, the old pictures of the old steam trains coming in. Is that a little bit passion of yours?
I don't know where that started. I did a whole series of the history of Clara train station. I think somebody had put up one photograph, and I think it was actually Michelle Monaghan actually put a fabulous photograph up, and I just thought that's lovely, and it kind of sparked, let's do a history of the train station. So we started how it actually came to be in Clara and how it went as far as Streamstown and joined up the Mullingar line, down as far as Banagher. And the thing about it is an awful lot of that rail bed is still there. So, even that, to bring that, I suppose, into the new generation, you would have a fantastic walkway down to Banagher to join up with the Shannon, or you could have one across the Streamstown to join up with the Moat railway line over there. But we did a series on the Clara train station when it opened, I think in 1859. I think it's coming up to the 1st of October. So we did a series of that and how it joined up with, as I said, Banagher and Streamstown, and then incidents that had happened. And then I know, certain things kind of generate additional information that comes along. I think a couple of weeks then after that, there was another interesting article in one of the local papers that J.J. Gibbons had put in about how the future King of England at some stage had actually got the train through Clara. So it's by putting up one story, it lends itself to somebody else going, oh, by the way, I heard this story. And it just builds and builds and builds. And that's what we're looking to do, is to draw that information out of people that we're not aware of.
Do you think the local heritage should be taught in schools?
Absolutely. I think people need to have an awareness of where they come from. I think there was a fabulous exercise done in about 1938, 1939, was called Dukas, and it's a national folklore collection. What they did was they went to all the schools right across the country, from, little one teacher schools in the remotest part of the country to the biggest ones, and they asked all the kids in all the schools to write little stories about their town, the local townlands, riddles, customs, feast days, and all the kids wrote a little anecdote about something that somebody told them, but they had to go to an older person in their family. So if these kids are writing it in 1939, chances are the people that they were speaking to might have been born just around the turn of the famine. So it's something that should be nearly replicated again to see what the kids today would actually write and compare the two of them. I think it would be a fantastic intergenerational project. But some of the stories that we've uncovered in the Dukas collection, you kind of think that's a bit of a fairy story. But when you actually delve a little bit deeper, you realise, actually, no, that's actually because of something that happened. Like there was one story, I think, in the Clara collection about a little girl who was saying that she wasn't allowed into a certain field because that's where the fairies were, and you shouldn't go into that field. And then when we talked about it and looked at it, we realised it was actually Killeen up in the hills that she was referencing. So there's that kind of tie back. You think it's only a kid's story, but there's actually something deeper behiund it. Yeah. So yeah, it's really interesting.
So there must be a lot of them to look into, is there?
There is, and if anyone wants, again, it's a free website. It's www.dukas.ie, and you can look for your own school. So there's two in Clara. There was the convent school, and then there was the Church of Ireland school, which was Midland Sax. But like Ratton has them, Ballycumber, Boher, Ferban, every town across the country had nominated somebody in their schools to do it. So it's a great, it can be very funny as well, some of the stories. But yeah, they're of their time, let's say.
Yeah, brilliant. Tara, what's your favourite heritage site in Clara?
I think it's a bit weird when I say this, but I love the graveyards. It's the serene nature of them, and they're so peaceful, but it's what you find when you're up there. So you'll find a headstone, it's absolutely covered in ivy, and you're just peeling back the layers, and then you find the name. And what I tend to do is go, right, who is this person? It's just a name and a date, and that's it. But then you'll go back and you'll find out, well, actually, this person, their son died in 1916 in Dublin. There was a family called the Firths family, Firth, and I always wondered, did anyone in Clara have a direct connection to 1916 and the Easter Rising? And then just by chance you find out that this woman had a son who was a police officer in Dublin and was actually shot during the 1916 Rising. You come across people like Katie Gall. I had always heard of this lady Katie Gall. Next thing you'll find her headstone, and the stories will start flowing up in the cemetery. So yeah, I find cemeteries very calming but really, really interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a good sense of personal satisfaction then when you, I suppose, clean the grave and it looks well, but then when you go back and find the ancestry of that person.
Yeah, and I suppose coming back to Michael White recently, he'd been looking for the graveyard of his great-grandfather for a long time, and then, that sense of satisfaction of finding it and, discovering it again, it's great.
What's your wish list for Heritage in Clara? What would you like to see?
Again, I suppose echoing what's been said already is I'd love a heritage site in Clara. There is so much, and there's a couple of areas in Clara that could lend itself to it. I think Clash of One is just screaming out for something. And the more I think about it, there's a fabulous museum in Dundee that was a similar situation. It was an old jute mill, and what they have done, it's multifunctional. It's used for weddings, it's used for conferences and seminars, but also the educational side. And when I was listening to Vincent Devine's podcast, I was just thinking, wouldn't it be a fabulous exhibition centre for the likes of Vincent or something like that? But yeah, I think Clash One with the pond, the river. Schools are always screaming at us about STEM, the science, technology, engineering and maths. And I just think what they did in Goodbodies in the 1850s, is screaming STEM, between the hydrology and the reservoir and how the water ran, the steam engines, everything. It's just lent itself to it.
Yeah, maybe we could make it happen, or the Heritage
Group.
Know. Yeah, it would be brilliant though, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I think it'd be a great asset to the town, and it could encompass so much. The scope of what's up there is fantastic. It would just, in terms of genealogy and people coming back from the diaspora, in terms of covering the various history sites in the town, I think would complement the Bog Centre and everything else. So yeah, it certainly would be a great addition.
So the starting point to get that then is, I suppose, your website and tourism leaflets, maybe a tourism centre.
Yeah.
Would that be a good starting point to get?
I think we need baby steps. I think we're in this for the long haul. It's not going to happen overnight. I think we just need to take baby steps, show, I suppose, the powers that be that we are actually serious about what we've done. And I think we've started to do that in terms of the funding applications that we're putting in, the fact that we're providing the walks, that we're constantly promoting, I suppose, government initiatives like the National Walking Day and various other bits and pieces on the Facebook page. So I think, once they realise we're serious and that we're in this for the long haul, we might pay dividends. But I think we really do need at this stage somewhere to actually showcase what we have, even on a small scale, but then to build that up incrementally.
Clara, it's nice to hear someone so passionate about the town. It's a great little town that we all love. Thank you very much for having the chat with me this evening.
Thanks, Lloyd.
Cheers.
Much appreciated.
Thank you. So I'm delighted to be joined next by Tommy Minnick. Tommy is also a huge member of the Clara Heritage Committee. Tommy, you're going to tell me a little bit about the current work that's going on in the graveyards.
I will indeed, Lloyd, and thanks very much for having me here. Look, I suppose before I go there, I think everybody would agree that the graveyards and the cemeteries are a very important part in terms of our heritage and our history. In fairness, if we didn't have those people from the past, we wouldn't have any history. We'd have no written, we'd have no verbal, and we'd have no physical. So the past means an awful lot. I remember an old adage one time where a man said to me, if you forget the past, you're blind in one eye. But if you dwell in the past, you're blind in both eyes. So for me, that sentiment is a kind of a compromise. We don't think of our own dead all the time, I suppose, but when we do, isn't it a lovely thing to remember and pray for them? And remember that old adage, it's a holy and a wholesome thought to pray for the dead. At the moment, we have a project which is the cleaning up of the old cemetery in the monastery. The committee and volunteers do a fantastic job, and we go to the monastery every Monday evening. Now the evenings are beginning to close in now, so it'll be coming to a bit of a halt at the moment. And we do Trojan work up there and cleaning it up. That type of work is very fulfilling, and it's pleasurable because, the occasions when you unearth those headstones and flagstones that are there, it's fulfilling when that happens. And it's also good, we document them, photograph them, and it's there for heritage for the people of Clara. Their relatives are buried there, and for the diaspora. Now, there's a great interest in that nowadays, the genealogy and trying to trace back your relatives. So that's the ongoing thing that's at the minute.
Can anybody volunteer to do this on a Monday night?
Anybody. Lord, we'd appreciate anybody coming up. Now, to be honest, you don't have to break your back or anything, but every little bit helps, if you know what I mean. And you get a sense of fulfilment, as I said, you know, when you see it being cleared and that. Now, I suppose our association so far has been with graveyards and the dead. Last year, the committee organised the clean-up of St. Bridget's, Kilbride, the cemetery. And knowing, I suppose, the history and the heritage that's involved in Kilbride, and also, I suppose, the story of our own St. Bridget, and we appreciate that history dates back to the 12th century. So there's an awful lot of history there. That particular job that we did, that was very, very hard work. You know, physically hard work, because it was like a small jungle.
Like years of neglect there.
Years and years of neglect, you know what I mean? And that was a real sense of fulfilment when we did that. That culminated also in a blessing and a commemoration in August last year, when we invited the public up, and we had a little bit of a ceremony there and a blessing. And we had, naturally enough, we had a marquee there with a tea and refreshments. It was lovely. So I suppose the three major things we've done so far are all involved with graveyards and
it's bringing back some life into them places. Pardon the pun.
Pardon the pun.
But it is, though. Yeah. It's bringing back some nice...
It is, yeah. Well, it's nice for me. I think it's lovely to remember the dead, in respectfully, of course, naturally enough. Now, I remember also when I was going to school, I remember a man reading in Latin, apart from Summa Theologica by St. Thomas Aquinas, and in it was a quote, Laborare est orare, which basically means to work is to pray. So I suppose in doing this work, that fulfilment is a prayer and a respect for the people that are dead.
So it's fulfilment in a lot of ways. You get your pleasure in seeing something being nicely taken care of.
You do indeed.
And then hopefully you're getting your rewards then.
Yeah, well, you see, the thing about it is it's not a kind of a once-off. I mean, you have to maintain it. Now, up in Kilbride, we have what we call our little eco-warrior. It's a pony belonging to Brian Sheridan, and he nibbles away at the grass. But sometimes the grass gets ahead of her, so we have to intervene. Okay. But these jobs are sort of ongoing, you know. Okay. We have to take care of them every so often. So, Tommy, is
Kilbride open? Can I go up there today and have a look around?
Absolutely, you're more than welcome. You know, and it's you know, as I said, it's a holy and a wholesome thought to pray for the dead. It's lovely to go up and visit, and the sense of tranquility and peace as well, you know what I mean? Now, I know the kids said to me one day, Dad, why do you be going into these graveyards? Won't you be long enough there? And I said, I will, but I still like going in.
Yeah. You had some recent discoveries in the old monastery cemetery?
We did indeed, yeah. Well, there's a discovery nearly every evening, you know what I mean? Somebody finds something. But we had a discovery there of Michael White's ancestors. Michael maintains that he was always wondering where his ancestors were buried. And of course, that was a fulfilment for him. Yeah. He's in the process, I think, of doing it up. And now the flagstone, the headstone, it was cracked. So he's in the process of having it all fixed up and tidied up, which is a lovely end to that particular find, you know what I mean?
And that was in the news, and that's a good news story for
Clara Heritage
and for Michael White.
Yes, and a good news story for the Heritage Committee. I mean, I'm not in it for any of the kudos that's in it. I get satisfaction out of doing it. Yeah. I like that physical work. That's the type of guy I am, you know. One of the other projects we had was involved in graveyards and death again, was last year the committee organised I suppose you could call it a whistle-stop tour, where we organised a bus to do a tour of our local and surrounding graveyards and cemeteries. And if you pardon the pun, it was aptly named by Clara as the Dead Interesting Tour.
Right.
Now, it was a brilliant success. And on each of those stops, we had somebody to say a few words, which was nice, give us a little bit of history, a little bit of detail at what was going on. And I was sort of requested to say a few words in our own Kilcremeen. Now that's a little cemetery. We affectionately call it the Children's Cemetery up there in Erie. I appreciate that all these cemeteries are in public view. I mean, you can't miss them, they're on the side of the road. This particular little cemetery, of course, is away from public view. It's way up in Brian Sheridan's field in Erie. It's the site where unbaptised babies were buried years ago. Now that I have a chance of saying, I would like to say that Brian Sheridan and his family and the generations before him have treated that area with respect down through the years. The fulfilment for that little cemetery came in November 2017 when there was a blessing for Kilbride. The final thing for me was that this was just a field where little babies were buried. But from November 2017, it became a consecrated, sacred ground. It was no longer just a field. And there was a headstone. It wouldn't be a headstone, it'd be a stone plaque.
A commemoration.
A commemoration was erected there. As I say, for that commemoration, there was a poem written for the planting of a tree in Kilbride, as I say, in November 2017. And this poem was written by Elizabeth Kelly. She's a sister of Bernie Henry. And for me, the poem actually says it all. You know, I appreciate that these little babies, unbaptised babies, were buried up there. And the sad part for me is that not too many people know about it. For the simple reason that it was a taboo to talk about it. You know what I mean? In times gone by. For me also, we say it was a horrible way for children to be buried, but we must also remember that at that particular time, our religion had its own traditions and customs, its beliefs and its taboos and that. And I suppose all these things dictated how them little babies should be buried. So that's basically just how it was. For me, the story of Kilbride is a sad story. And the poem that was written for that blessing, for that occasion, that consecration, I think says it all for me. I'm just wondering, would it be okay if I recited that poem for you now?
Absolutely.
For you and for your listeners.
Be delighted. Yeah.
And to welcome them up. Come and see Kilbride and say a prayer for all the little ones that are there. And we do know that we have a sort of a record, or a verbal record, of the last burials took place there in the late 1940s and into the 50s. So I'm sure there are people still alive in Clara who have siblings who were buried in Kilbride. And to respect and appreciate the mothers and the families in their trauma, and I suppose that lonely pain where they couldn't express it, you know what I mean? Hence that lovely title of the poem, Lost Angels. These little darlings passed away before being spirit blessed. So young they had not yet done wrong, no sins they could confess. Belief dictated where they lay and how they should be mourned. Their weeping mothers could not cry, nor the families be informed. These tiny souls so secretly and silently disposed, no mention of their tiny lives for fear of being exposed. No songs were sung to ease their path, and no lights to guide their way, for custom stated they be buried before the break of day. The sadness it lingered on through time, the wounds they never healed, the agony continued as that grief was not revealed. A loss so great will carve a memory deep into your heart, and never can you truly let these little souls depart. But here tonight we bless these graves and set those spirits free to fly to where they laugh and play for all eternity. For they have all been heaven sent, and now they're going home. No longer need these little angels in that darkness roam. So let us mark their passing with the planting of this tree, those beautiful lost angels from our close community. And we can watch it growing tall as time keeps marching on, and we might sometimes stop and pray or sing a little song.
That's absolutely beautiful, Tommy.
Thank you very much, Lloyd.
There's a lot of emotion there, Tommy.
There is indeed. The emotion for me is a part that the little children were buried there with no recognition or anything like that. Poor mothers couldn't even talk about it. And for me, it's a place of special remembrance too, because when I was a young man, young apprentice in good buddies, along with all the boys,
Another story,
along with your daddy and the rest of them. My grandmother told me that 2 of the grandparents' children were buried in Kilbride. So for me, it's a special place of remembrance also.
Tommy, thank you very much for coming in to talk to us today about your brilliant work with the Heritage Group, with the graveyards. It's wonderful to see. And, as you say, everybody is welcome to these different graveyards to pray and take it in.
God bless, and thanks very much, Lloyd.
Thanks, Tommy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
My next guest from Clara Heritage Group is a man that's been seen walking around lots lately and giving some great tours. Brian Sheridan, how are things?
How are you, Lloyd?
Brian, you're going to tell us about the Erie Hills and a bit of the history there.
Yeah, well, Erie Hills, they're steeped in history, and the problem is the people of Clara don't know the history of Clara and Erie Hills. So if you start on Erie and you head up the Erie Way, you come to a field on the right-hand side, which the first Offaly County final was played in 1896. Now, people would pass by that field day in and day out, and they'd never look into it or know the history that was attached to it. And then if you continue up along the road, you'll come to a field of mine on the left-hand side, and we call it the labourers' field. And you might say, why the labourers? Well, the reason it's called the labourers, during the war, people had plots in it, and that's how people of Clara lived in that time. And then you move along up to the top of the hill, and you look down over the gorgeous Clara Bog, over 2,000 acres preserved for all time, thanks to David Bellamy, who was the...
Famously said he wanted to be buried in Clara Bog, didn't he?
He did, and he spent his honeymoon on Clara Bog. I could find a better place for a honeymoon, but anyhow...
Somewhere warmer in here.
If you talk about a bog, we would always think of the Hartshire. We got on the bog, cutting turf, but that day is gone now, thank God, and the bog is looking great. Every time you look out, it's a different colour or a different view. So you move along every way then, and you look out into Fleming's Field, and that's where the Mass Rock was. And there's bits of that Mass Rock all over the world. People might know it, but it was brought. I remember getting bits of it for a cousin of mine. She was a nun in Africa, and every time she'd come home, she'd bring this bits of Mass Rock back with her. Right. So Erie Hills is in Africa. So you move along then down to the Piper Stile, and the story is that the Piper sat on the stile, and if the redcoats were coming during the penal times, he'd play the pipes, and everyone would be at Mass, at the Mass Rock would disperse, and no one would know what was going on.
So, Brian, this is all on one walk?
This is all on one walk. Then, of course, you head around and you see a very old house on the left-hand side there. Joe Sheridan used to live in it, and I'm glad to say it's looking grand and fresh and clean. Carol has cleaned it up. Beautiful old house. And you head down along then back to the new road, and you come down the lower road. And if you look out on part of that, you're the left-hand side of the Eskers there. You've just come across the top of them and right round it. And there's plenty of history there as well of different things that went on. The Postman's Walk is there, and Bailey's. And at the back of the forest in Erie Hills, there was 29 houses there. And English landlords drove the people out of them, and they went to live in Pulla, most of them. They went on that direction. Now, no one had known there was 29 houses. There was a village there. So, there's a lot that we should know and we don't know. And then you head back down along to the new road, and that's everywhere. But there's other ways. There's the Erie Marlborough walkway in by Ballinach. There's the Dory Way, and then there's lots of other walks. Even up Bahamore, if you look out across, you'll see the moving bog of Kilmalady. It moved in 1832, covered 10 houses on the way. And again, another history lesson that people don't know.
Of course, all this brought to the forefront now by the great work of the Heritage Group.
Yeah, well, without heritage, you have nothing. You have to live by your heritage because...
Of course, the boardwalk now is bringing so many people out to the bog, isn't it?
Well, the boardwalk is a great success. I do go out to it almost every day. And there's always 5 or 6 cars, people walking. Unbelievable the enjoyment people get. And then we have a new boardwalk, almost finished. We're waiting on the council to complete the path from the new road down to the bottom of the bog. And then you'll be able to walk from Clara to the bog, to the boardwalk, without any interruption. And it'll be safe for children and people walking.
What gives you the buzz about heritage, Brian?
Well, I suppose it's thinking of what our people endured to hand down Ireland the way it is today. And let's hope when we leave in Ireland, we leave it in a better state as well, because they did a lot of great work that probably wasn't recognised. It's like Bord na Móna cutting away the bog long ago. People are saying now they were terrible, they did terrible harm, which they did. But at the time, it was a necessity. People got a lot of work and a lot of, they kept families alive. And if it didn't happen, what would have happened? We don't know. So now, thank God that we're moved on, we can afford to keep the bog for what it really is, for the atmosphere and the good air that you get when you walk the bog. And then across from the boardwalk, we're putting in another boardwalk and a walkway around Tony's Hill. Tony's Hill is a very famous hill. Again, up to a few years ago, if you mentioned Tony's Hill, nobody would know where you were talking about. But Tony's Hill was there as a lime hill in the middle of a bog. Can't understand why it's there, but it's there. And Malone's lived in it in 1896. There was 3 children born on Tony's Hill in 1894, 96 and 98, I think it was. And they eventually moved into Clara. But that's a very historic hill, and the little house, there's even a poem written about it, and it mentions all the places in and around Erie Hills and Tony's Hill, and about the card players, the way they played cards at Tony's Hill.
The walks you do, Brian, are very successful, aren't they?
The walks are very successful, and it's not just the walks, it's the way the people mix us and the way they talk to one another, and they meet people they didn't talk to for years, and they have a great old conversation as they walk along the roads. And I think that's the best part of it, is the
satisfaction
and communications. Yeah. It's unbelievable. Everyone loves chatting with another.
Yeah.
That's great in itself.
What's your favourite heritage site in Clara, Brian?
Well, it'd have to be the New Road and Kilbride Cemetery, like.
That means a lot to you, Brian.
It means a lot because it was derelict for years and nobody knew it was there. And the funny thing about Kilbride is, I say every old family in Clara has children buried there. And their relatives belong to everyone in it. And they don't know it. Because at that time, children were just buried in the dusk of the evening, and that was it. But that was then. It's different now. It wouldn't happen. It's
consecrated ground now. Thanks to yourself for a lot of hard work on that. People can go there and visit it. It's tidied up and everything.
Oh, it's tidied up, and you can open the gate and go in and take you the children that was buried there.
Brian, would you appeal to younger people to get involved with the Heritage Group?
I would indeed. I think it would be great for children, because what happened in our generation, probably, we left it too long, and a lot of the people that had the history had passed on before we started talking about heritage. There was, I suppose, 40 or 50 years in that period of time that people, they weren't really concerned about heritage. It's only in later years that it really become a buzzword again, and when people sees the value of talking about their past, they really grasp the nettle then, and they continue to look at heritage and see, and especially for people abroad, they love the heritage.
I think, would there ever be a way that we could commemorate the likes of the field there where the first GAA county final was, to have a little plaque outside that field, and so people could go and read it on their walks?
Well, that's in the plan, that we're going to mark all the heritage sites. We're going to put signs on them all as soon as we get time and the old favourite money to do it. But we intend to do it all and write a little bit about it. When people goes for a walk, they can dwell on these places and know what happened there hundreds of years ago.
Brian, thanks very much for coming in to chat us about the different walks around the town. And it's very, very interesting. There's lots to see even on one walk, as you mentioned there. So we'll have to take a trip around Tony's Hill and everywhere very soon. Thanks, Brian. My next guest is a lady called Anna Orman. Anna has a very interesting story and she's going to tell us about that now. Anna, first, give us a little bit of background. Where are you from originally?
Well, I was born in Namibia, grew up in South Africa, and then my husband and I became part of the proverbial expat world. So we lived between Africa, Ireland, and the Middle East. And we have both Irish and South African nationality. And 2 years ago, we decided to find a home.
Right.
And when we first moved to Ireland, we really fell in love with the Irish countryside, and we decided to make Ireland our permanent home.
Right. So why the move to the great little town here in Clara?
Well, we were looking for a place and a river, a house of historic and architectural merit, hopefully situated on a river. I'm really drawn to rivers. I think it stems very much from the fact that I studied archaeology, so I look for the past in almost everything. And rivers, as so many waterways did thousands of years ago, were viewed as liminal spaces, sort of a threshold, a doorway between the worlds. And when we first viewed, and funny enough, it was exactly a year ago, September, that we first had our viewing of Grove Cottage.
Okay, so just give us a little bit of history about Grove Cottage and where is it in Clara?
Okay, Grove Cottage is located in Clashwa, right next to the rather Dickensian industrial factories that the Goodbodies created. It sits right on the river. Literally, I stand in my kitchen and the river flows below me. It was originally built in 1869, and there were 2 cottages built for the head gaffers that worked the river.
They're quite unusual cottages, aren't
Yes.
they? With the roof. And
Yeah, they examples of what is referred to as, in architectural terms, the Belfast truss or the Folklore roof. And we have now discovered evidence that they were actually designed by the architect J.S. Malviny, that designed Inchmore House and the Parochial House here in Clara, and did a huge amount of architectural work for the Goodbodies and for the Quakers in Ireland in general. And so they're very unique. They also listed as part of Ireland's architectural heritage, and so they preserved because they're the only 2 examples left. The joining cottage as well. There are only 2 of them left in County Offaly, and there are very few of them left in Ireland.
like I would pass those houses maybe twice a week.
Yeah.
I always admired them for the structure of the roof and that, but the
yes.
history behind them is quite...
It's absolutely extraordinary. And also when you actually look at the design, because my husband's an architect, and we were absolutely astounded that those 2 cottages really show experimentation with early modernism, which is so unusual. And you find that in the middle of the countryside.
Okay. So you've lived in so many different countries
Yes.
throughout your life. You're
Yes.
a year in Clara now.
Yeah.
So what has it been like?
It's been absolutely wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. You know, we have been made to feel extremely welcome by everybody. COVID has been horrible, but it's also been a blessing in disguise for us. We had a contractor in, he made the house habitable, and we had to move in. And we brought our furniture in, and, you know, we were pottering away in the garden and in the house, and people just came across to introduce themselves, and we got to know the people of Clara.
Yeah. So Anna, with moving into a new house or renovating an old house, I've done so myself, you find different objects and different things. Have you found anything in Clashwan?
Yes, we have indeed. When we lifted the carpets, we discovered the original pitch pine floors that they installed, the Goodbodies installed in those cottages, dating back to the 19th century. And what makes it unusual is the fact that pitch pine floors were not really used within domestic dwellings. They were usually used in factories or in churches. And then on the back of the house facing the river, we discovered 2 stained glass windows with this wrought iron diamond grid, pattern grid on top of it. And yet again, after the research that we've done, and I've spoken to Rachel McKenna, the conservation architect at County Offaly Council, this is also unusual, especially in Ireland. It was very much a trend, these fake windows that you found in England.
Were they a part of the house?
Yes, they were a part of the house. And then one of our neighbours pointed out to us that when Andy Minnick, the previous owner, was painting the gate, the pedestrian gate, that he found a date of 1783. So the wall and the pedestrian gate and the vehicle gate in front of our house actually predate Grove Cottage by about a century. Fantastic. So it's incredibly exciting.
Treasure finds.
Absolute treasure trove.
Have you found any money up there?
No, not yet.
Of course,
Unfortunately.
and you've great neighbours up there. Barry Carey, another Clara legend.
We do. We absolutely do. And and Burr has been instrumental and giving us, little tidbits of information. He was the one who pointed out the fact that the date was on the pedestrian gate. And it's also wonderful because I have had a gentleman called Fergus that lives down the road. I'm not sure what Fergus's surname is. He has a little dog called
Fergus Cronin, yeah.
And lovely man.
Another legend.
Oh,
You're
gosh.
surrounded by great neighbours.
Oh, he told me that he played as a child in the gardens of Grove Cottage because he became friends with the family that lived there. And it was a Dutch family that worked for the Good Bodies as electricians at that point. And he played with the children in the garden. And it was wonderful to listen to him, describe the place dating back a number of years. So brilliant. I'm trying to create a sort of an annal of Grove Cottage. I would like to see how far I can take it back to trace who lived in the place and keep it for my daughter. I think it's very important to do that.
That'll be very interesting. Come back and talk to us again.
I shall do so.
If you find any more discoveries. So what interested you with heritage in Clara, apart from the river?
Well, yeah, I'm slowly but surely getting to know the heritage of Clara. And like I said, I'm really drawn to the past because I feel that heritage is incredibly important. History is usually about kings and queens and politicians and wars and that. But heritage is about ordinary people like us.
Yeah, we have that heritage here in Clara, don't we?
Yes, absolutely. And, I'd like to quote someone I admire greatly. He's an architectural historian in Moscow, Alexander Moshayev, and he's fighting a losing battle to save old Moscow. And he, in one of his essays, he wrote that old buildings know the true passage of time because between those walls, the drama of our human lives has been written. And if we lose that, we lose something of our humanity. And I think that really has always hit home for me, how important heritage is, to respect it, to preserve it.
Anna, thank you very much for coming in.
Absolutely.
I know the chat has been brief, but it's been very interesting.
Yes.
And I wish yourself and your husband best of luck in Clashawan for years to come.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time.
So next on my list is a very prominent member of the Clara Heritage Committee, Ray Henry. How's things?
Very good, Lloyd. Thank you very much for inviting us here.
You're very welcome.
Anna.
Heritage is very important nowadays, isn't it?
It is. It really has gained momentum here in the town. It really has.
Which is lovely to see.
It is. It's a terrific.
And what a fascinating story from Anna. Moving from many different countries, Namibia, right here to the little town of Clara.
We're blessed to have her as our neighbour, the far side of the road.
Yeah, it's fantastic, yeah. And so, Ray, we have so many historic and natural sites here in Clara. Tell us about one that, pardon the pun, floats your boat, is the River Brosna.
A big part of Clara's heritage is the river. But for me, who swam and learned to swim in the river and the pond as a child, I never truly realised the magnificence of it until I saw it on the video. We did a video a few years ago and posted it on YouTube, and we have about little over 2,000 links on it. And it's called Clara's Hidden Gem. And the river really is a hidden gem. I'm delighted to say that the video, along with work from a number of sectors within the community here in Clara, has heightened awareness of the potential of the very special waterways. And various bodies have become really interested in the Brosna as she flows and meanders through Clara. These bodies have been very supportive, such as Waterways Ireland and, of course, Offaly County Council, both of whom have been a great help, so thanks to them all. The long-term goal, Lloyd, is to one day be able to walk the banks of the Brosna from St. Anthony's to the metal bridge up past Marion Square. The banks of the river are magical, and it is especially breathtaking at the pond when their swans are visible and swimming around. So it's such an attractive sight. The river, as you know, as you and I and most people in Clara knows, has amazing industrial engineering along it. And there's a man-made over 20 acres pond, untouched in many, many years. Dangerous right now, but with huge scope for development. Then there are still the mill races and the sluice gates and the concrete bats. The industrial history along the banks of the Brosna and in Clara is really astonishing when you really look at it and think about it. It's something, Lloyd, that many of us living here just took for granted. And it's only often visitors to the town who make us appreciate the fantastic heritage of the town. This is a town that is perfectly situated for the development of an industrial museum, with the train station on our doorstep sitting between the bog and the river. It's a must for the future. Maybe, Lloyd, if we keep talking about it often enough, it might just happen.
Yeah, wouldn't it be fantastic?
It would, because we can do it. People say all the stuff is gone. You can bring back in the replicas, you don't have to.
But there's huge scope for tourism in Clara. That is so untouched, which is a pity. But hopefully with people like yourselves and Anna, that we can make that happen in some either small way, to get people into the town.
I agree with you.
And talk to me a little bit about the engineering along the river. You mentioned the metal bridge, but there's so much more, isn't there?
Well, yeah, I mean, the old factory itself, there's just an amazing history to the factory, I mean, if you pass by, and your father would bear the fruit in this one, if you pass by the factory at 1 o'clock any day when the factory was in full bloom, I mean, you put your life at risk. You used to dash out of the factory, cars, then either looked right and
the siren
left.
would go at one.
Yes. And then there was the factory horn every morning. It used to ring about 3 times. And the last one was before at 5 to 8 to be in for 8 o'clock.
Yeah, there's great stories about it, isn't there?
There's terrific. There's terrific.
Just
great
tell us,
and sad stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about how the video came to fruition of the Ireland's Hidden Gem on the Brosna River.
My wife was the one who developed it, along with myself and her brother Peter, and the Heritage. It was probably the inception of the Heritage Committee, because Tommy was there with us, Brian Sheridan was with it, and we videoed it, and Paul, our son, got involved in it too, and then it's linked with a song. Oh, God, I can't think of the song now. You'll before about 3 o'clock in the morning now. I remember that song.
Don't mess with me at 3 o'clock.
So it's it's over 2,000 links to it, which is
fantastic.
It's brilliant.
So how feasible is this ultimate goal of the walk from St Anthony's to the Metal Bridge?
Well, it's in its early stages now. We have been granted €5,000 by Offaly County Council to do research on the potential development and to develop architecturally a drawing of what we call the lineage park. Now, it's not the official name of it, but it's just what we call it. It's at Paddy Scanlon's house, right up to Anna's house. And we're looking to develop that into a park. Now,
that was a famous place for the blind windows as well.
It was. That was so sad that those blind windows were knocked down. But that will happen. That will happen. So it's going to be a park, and then step by step, bit by bit, we're going to go further up into the sluice gates, the back of the factory, and the pond, of course, which was very popular. And the bats.
What an amenity did you have, the pond, if that was developed in some way?
It's fabulous. There's many ideas that you could implement there.
Yeah. But it's great that you are starting, and we as a town are, I suppose, waking up a small bit to what we have here in town.
They're very committed.
Yeah.
Heritage Committee.
Ray, what's some of your favourite heritage sites around, apart from the river?
Well, I suppose we've developed Kilbride Cemetery, because that was left to wreck and ruin. It was last developed 20 years ago. And when the Heritage Committee was set up, Brian Sheridan mentioned it, and we said we'd go up and look at it, and it was all covered over, and bits and pieces could be seen hanging. with their head over the grass. And we were, myself, Brian and Tommy, dug it and cleaned it for 12 months. 12 months, all but 7 days. It took us to do it during the winter, hail, rain and snow. Yeah. But we did it. And
I've seen an overview shot of that. There's an amazing shape to it, isn't there?
There is.
Uncanny, like a coffin.
Yeah, that's exactly. It is. It's uncanny. And the other thing is that when we had to walk around different graveyards in the area now, including Ballycumber too, and we were in the monastery talking to Brother Sean, and Brother Sean suggested that our second goal could be to do up the grave adjacent to the monastery graveyard. So we did that, and we've come across graves that have been hidden over time. One was the Whites, P.J. White. One of the founding members of the GAA. We came across that.
I was talking to Tommy about that, but he said not alone. He said the satisfaction is brilliant.
The satisfaction.
When you look back and see it, what you've done.
And I'll tell you, by the time you leave that area at night, you're really, you've been working.
Yeah. Well,
so it's terrific.
Well, it's a credit to you.
Yeah.
I suppose you'll accept volunteers, you will.
Yes, absolutely. Are we very good workers there now? If nothing else, but people come up and look at it, that's as much a contribution as
absolutely,
as a lot.
But I think the Heritage Committee is going to grow, and I wish you every success.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. I hope the dream of the walkway from St. Anthony's to the Metal Bridge comes to fruition.
It will. It's just about talking about it and getting funding step by step.
Ray Henry, thanks for your contribution.
Thank you very much, Lloyd.
At Frederick Street I would ramble with a young lass by my side, down by the Brosna River where tranquil waters lie. I could see St. Anthony's College from the bridge at Charlestown. Golden memories linger on the streets of Clara Town.
This podcast is brought to you by Bagot Centra, the Square Clara, for all your grocery needs. And why not try our delicious food made fresh every day from our deli? Bagot Centra Clara. Live every day.
You just listened to What's the Story with Lloyd Bracken. Check out all our social channels for info on new episodes. Oh, and thanks for listening. On the Town.